This is the world's deadliest border. The Mediterranean Sea. Thousands die here every year trying to cross from North Africa to Europe. The European Union is claiming
human rights.
that people are drowning on its doorstep.
We call this politics of letting die.
The EU is struggling to deal with migration, with severe consequences. We will show you where Europe is creating walls, how the continent is losing its values on the way, and who is profiting. This is the Italian island of Lampedusa, a place for tourists to relax, but also home to scenes like these, overcrowded boats arriving from Africa. Because Lampedusa is closer to Africa than it is to the rest of Europe. And it's the main destination of the deadliest migration routes in the world. Since 2014, almost 30,000 people have died or gone missing while trying to cross the Mediterranean. So why are so many people taking this risk? Some are fleeing wars and persecution. They have the legal right to apply for asylum. But to do so, asylum seekers have to be on EU territory. Others are migrating because they're escaping poverty, which is not a legal basis to claim asylum in the EU. Neither group is usually eligible for a visa to enter the EU. That's why many take these irregular migration routes and are ready to risk their lives.
We have not, in a really sensible and serious manner, tried to end this and tried to prevent this. We call this politics of letting die. It's not actively killing people. We don't even have to touch them. We just have to let them die by not providing help in a reasonable amount of time.
That's Austrian researcher Judith Kohlenberger. She focuses on the EU's asylum policy and migration. The EU and its member states' coast guards have saved many people in distress. But critics say the EU isn't doing enough to protect refugees and migrants. And there have even been reports of Greek coast guards illegally pushing boats out of EU waters. The EU has pledged to protect refugees under international treaties. In 2023 alone, just over 1 million people applied for asylum in EU countries. But many have no chance of being granted asylum. And most EU countries say too many people are coming.
We have our international obligations. We will fulfill them. We have done that in the past. We do this now. But we as Europeans will decide who comes to Europe and under what circumstances, and not the smugglers and traffickers.
For human smugglers and traffickers, irregular migration to the EU is big business. They can charge thousands of euros per person for the journey, forcing as many people as possible onto unfit boats. In 2023, in Italy alone, more than 150,000 people arrived by sea. These are the top 5 countries they came from. And as we saw, many of them entered Italy through Lampedusa. But just look at how small the island is. It has around 6,000 residents. More than twice that number of migrants and refugees arrived in just 1 week in September 2023. Putting a huge strain on the island's infrastructure. And creating discontent among Lampedusa residents, who have experienced this time and again.
Da oggi Lampedusa dice basta! Nessuno più! Questo messaggio deve passare sia all'Europa e sia al governo, che i lampedusani sono stanchi!
This is Giorgia Meloni, Italy's far-right leader who was largely elected because of her anti-migration stance. The chaos in Lampedusa is the perfect background for her message.
e in ogni caso se entrate illegalmente in Italia sarete trattenuti e rimpatriati. Sarà dato mandato alla difesa di realizzare nel più breve tempo possibile le strutture in modo tale che siano sufficienti a trattenere gli immigrati illegali.
Meloni is among those profiting from the chaos, as are many other populist politicians in the EU, says migration researcher Judith Kohlenberger.
They need the problem and they need this issue of unresolved migration crisis, one after the other, etc., because this is a politics of fear that is being played.
And it's been playing out for Meloni and others who demand this.
Concentrarsi sulla difesa dei confini esterni.
Even EU countries that took in a lot of refugees are joining that demand. In 2014, only very little of the EU external border was fenced. Now there's 6 times as much to keep people out. And even more fences are in the works. Most experts say border reinforcements are not a surefire method to prevent irregular migration.
Fortified borders do not prevent people from making their way to Europe in the first place, because they do not touch upon the reasons for migration. And so what happens in reality is that migration pathways are being redirected, very often to even more dangerous routes.
We've seen that here in the Balkans. Many who fled the war in Syria used these routes from Turkey to enter the EU. But in 2015, Hungary tried to prevent people passing through its territory. The country's prime minister is known for his right-wing rhetoric.
Nem néhány százan, nem néhány ezren, hanem több százezer, sőt millió bevándorló ostromolja Magyarország és Európa határait.
In 2015, Hungary started building this fence along its border with Serbia. But people found other ways to migrate to the EU.
It also means that smugglers can raise their prices because they can use this as an argument because borders are so difficult to cross.
This brings us back to Lampedusa, one of the main destinations for migrants and refugees right now. A fence obviously cannot work in the open water, so the EU is going for another strategy.
La questione è come si fermano le partenze illegali.
Most of the boats that arrive here in Lampedusa depart from Tunisia, about 200 kilometers away. In summer 2023, Giorgia Meloni joined European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on a trip to Tunisia.
We are here as Team Europe.
And Team Europe wants Tunisia to stop migrants from leaving its shores. In return, Tunisia was offered a lot of money, a package of up to 1 billion euros in investments, including around 100 million for border security.
We both have a vast interest in breaking the cynical business model of smugglers and traffickers. It is horrible to see how they deliberately risk human lives for profit. So we will work together on an anti-smuggling operational partnership, and we will support Tunisia with border management. The objective is to have a holistic approach to migration policy rooted in the respect for human rights.
But it's human rights that make this deal highly controversial. Look at who the EU is making the deal with. President Kais Saied, who not only cracked down on Tunisia's opposition, but on migrants too.
عموما مذكرة التفاهم تركت معناها وضع كارثي على وضعية المهاجرين في تونس.
This is Ramadan Ben Omar. He works for Tunisia's leading rights group that monitors the situation of migrants and refugees. He says that with the help of the EU, Tunisia ramped up its naval control. It helped them stop 80,000 migrants and refugees on their way to Europe.
فإن السلطات التونسية سابقا كانت تطلق سراحهم، لكن منذ شهر أوت تقوم السلطات التونسية بطرد كل المهاجرين الذين يتم اعتراضهم في البحر نحو الحدود الليبية أو الحدود الجزائرية، وهو شكل من أشكال العقاب لكل من يجرؤ على المغادرة عبر البحر.
Hundreds of other people waiting to depart were allegedly driven outside the town of Sfax and are still living there in miserable conditions.
الاتحاد الأوروبي شجع السلطات التونسية على اتخاذ مثل هذه الممارسات القمعية.
And the EU partnered up with other autocratic leaders to essentially keep migrants and refugees from coming. And apart from billions of euros, these leaders also received something else: leverage.
Europe becomes liable to blackmail from these third countries because it clearly shows to the world there is nothing that Europe is more afraid of than the arrival of refugees.
Take Turkey and the EU's most prominent migration deal. Since 2016, the country has received up to 9 billion euros for essentially preventing migrants and refugees from entering the EU. But look what happened in 2020. Turkey reopened its border with Greece and let migrants and refugees move towards the EU. Greek border police used force to control the crowds. 2 deaths and thousands of injuries were reported. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had essentially used human beings as leverage, trying to pressure the EU for even more money. With the new migration pact, the EU is now planning to even further outsource enforcement. For example, with centers at EU external borders where asylum seekers can be held. Critics say the pact is a betrayal of EU values. And as we've seen, the bloc has already been willing to compromise its values. While populists, human traffickers, and autocrats are profiting. And experts agree, none of the measures will stop people from trying to get to Europe, even at the cost of their own lives.